Matan Torah wasn't just the greatest revelation in the history of the world, but it also changed the world. You see, when Hashem created the world, when he created Adam and Chava, the physical and the spiritual world were linked. But when Adam and Chava ate from the Eitz Hadat, Hashem severed that link. And we get that in a midrash in Shemot Rabbah on this week's Parsha, when it says the king decreed that Romans could no longer go down to Syria and Syrians cannot go up to Rome. In other words, it's describing this break between Shemayim, the spiritual world that's above, and the physical world that's below, and they can't meet each other. But it goes on to say in that midrash that Hashem changed the decree at Sinai. And we're told that Hashem descends upon the mountain and he tells Moshe to ascend. And that is the significant time when they meet. And that is the linking again of the physical and the spiritual. So once again, the spiritual can dwell on earth and we can affect the spiritual world and raise ourselves up spiritually in a way that we couldn't do previously. And of course, we're given the way to do that because we do that through Torah. Want to understand, go on a journey and understand what went on at Sinai, and then to understand the Aseret HaDibrot through that prism. And in order to do that, we go on a journey looking at Sinai and the Aseret HaDibrot through the discussion that Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva have as to what happened at Sinai. And I think if we go through that and look at the prism, we can then get to a chiddush about what it is to be a Jew and what that means for us in our everyday lives. Just the most amazing idea that we can get from going on this journey. So let's go on this journey together and get to that level of understanding. So Rabbi Yishmael says that at Sinai, we said yes to the positive commandments and we said no to the negative commandments. Rabbi Akiva says that at Sinai, we said yes to the positive commandments, but we also said yes to the negative commandments. Rabbi Yishmael says that at Sinai, we saw what can be seen and we heard what can be heard. So in other words, we saw the lightning and we saw the smoke and we heard the thunder, we heard the shofar and we heard the words that Hashem spoke. Rabbi Akiva says we saw what can be seen at Sinai, but we also saw what can be heard. In other words, we saw the lightning and we saw the smoke, but we also saw the thunder and we saw the shofar and we saw the words that Hashem spoke. So the question is, what are they discussing? Are they really discussing the special effects show that Hashem put on at Sinai? Is that really what the debate is? And of course it isn't. They're looking at Sinai from a different prism, and that's why we get a different view. Rabbi Yishmael is looking at Sinai from this descent of the spiritual into the physical world, the spiritual Hashem coming into the physical world. What is remarkable, the miracle of that, is that Hashem could descend into this world and we can remain human. How can that be? Hashem created a situation where we could retain our humanity but still encounter Hashem in this world. That's the miracle. And therefore Rabbi Yishmael says, we saw what can be seen and we heard what can be heard. Why is that profound? We always see what can be seen and hear what can be heard. Why is that so profound? Because for Hashem to be able to descend into this world and we stay human, that is the miracle. So we could see the lightning and we could see the smoke and we could hear the thunder and we could hear the shofar and we could hear the words of Hashem. And because we had this human experience, then we said yes to the positive mitzvot, because it makes sense to say yes to the positive mitzvot. But as human beings, when we're told not to do something, we see that we need to restrain ourselves. We see the barrier. And therefore it makes sense to say, and no, we won't partake of that then because we're told not to. In other words, we can say to Hashem, yes, we'll put on tefillin, and no, we won't ignite a flame on Shabbos. Makes sense to do it in that way. Rabbi Akiva is looking at Sinai from a completely different aspect. He's looking at it from the aspect of Bnei Yisrael being able to raise themselves spiritually, to reach spiritual heights that we'd never been able to reach before, to ascend. The reason why the physical world is so real for us, is so tangible, is because we can see, because of our sight. So I can see a chair in front of me and I know it's a chair. It's real. I can see a table in front of me and I know it's a table. I can see a dog in front of me and I know it's a dog. But that's not how we experience the spiritual world. We experience the spiritual world through hearing, through audio. Hence we say, Shema Yisrael, hear, O Israel, listen, Israel. Once we're into hearing, hearing requires us to infer, to interpret, to try and understand. And therefore it's different. If I see a dog bark, I know the dog barked. If someone says to me, are you sure the dog barked? I say, yes, I saw it with my own eyes. But what happens if I only hear a dog bark? Then I have to interpret. I have to infer. I can understand. I know what a dog is. I've recognized that sound. Yes, I know the dog barked. But if someone says to me, are you absolutely sure the dog barked? I say, well, I think it did. I mean, I didn't see it, but I heard it. It's not the same level of understanding. It's not the same level of surety. When Rabbi Akiva says that at Sinai, we saw what could be seen. In other words, we saw the lightning and we saw the smoke. He's saying that our physical reality was not diminished at Sinai. We had the same physical reality and experience that we always have. But then when he says, but we also saw the thunder, and we also saw the shofar, and we also saw the words that Hashem spoke, what Rabbi Akiva is saying is, our spiritual experience at Sinai, just in that moment, was as clear as our physical experience. In other words, there was no difference between the physical and the spiritual. We had absolute clarity at Matan Torah of both. And therefore, he says, we said yes to the positive commandments, but we also said yes to the negative commandments. Because once we'd been raised up to a spiritual level, we saw them all as the same. We saw them all just as divine will. We saw the oneness of Hashem, that it's all just divine will, and therefore there was no difference between a positive and a negative. And therefore we said yes to the positive, and we said yes to the negative. The question is who's right? Was it Rabbi Yishmael or Rabbi Akiva? The reality is, they're both right. They're talking about one unitary experience, but they're talking about it from a different point of view. So from the point of view of Torah coming down into this world, then Rabbi Yishmael is correct. Because we keep Torah in this world, this most spiritual and godly of things, that we have an understanding of Hashem that we never had before. Yes, it still might be a limited understanding because we're human, but it gave us an understanding and a depth of understanding of Hashem we've never had before. And yet we've maintained our humanity. We still see what can be seen. We still hear what can be heard. We still function in the way that human beings do. And therefore we say yes to the positive and no to the negative because we still see the barriers and the restraint that we have to show with the negative and the must-dos with the positive. Rabbi Akiva is talking about the spiritual ascent, that Torah gives us the ability to raise ourselves in a way where there is no difference between the physical and the spiritual, that we have the ability through Torah to raise ourselves to a madrega where the spiritual world is as clear to us and as real to us as the physical world. And then we say yes to everything because we see the oneness of Hashem. We see the fact that it's all divine will. That is what he's talking about. They're both correct. They're just looking at it from a different prism. Now we understand what's going on between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva. Let's use that understanding to look at the Aseret HaDibrot. So there are a few things we understand about the Aseret HaDibrot already, and let's just bring those down to make sure that we understand them. So we were told as children that 1 to 5 is Bein Adam LaMakom. It's between man and Hashem, the first 5 of the Aseret HaDibrot. And then we understand the next 5, 6 to 10, are Bein Adam LaChaveiro. They're between man and man. So we understand that. Nechama Libovitz comes along, and she explains as well that each side of the Aseret HaDibrot go from the easiest to the hardest. And we're not saying that they're easy, we're just saying in relative terms they go from easy to hard. So number 1 is the easiest of that side, and number 5 is the hardest of that side. And number 6 is the easiest of that side, and number 10 is the hardest of that side. But there's one other thing. The Aseret HaDibrot from 1 to 5 go from thought to action. They cascade downwards. So we start with thought and we end up at number 5 with action. Number 6 remains with action, and then it starts to cascade up. So by the time you get to number 10, you go to thought. That is known as a chiastic structure, where you have, if you like, an ascent, you reach a peak which stays the same, and then you go down the other side. So if you think of it like a triangle or a mountain, where you start with thought and from 1, you cascade up till you get to action at number 5. Number 6, you stay at action and then you start to cascade down. So by the time you get to number 10, you get back to thought. It's a chiastic structure. So we understand the Aseret HaDibrot, the first half are between man and Hashem. The second half are between man and man. We understand that they start with easy and get to hard, number 1 to 5, and then 6 easy and to number 10 hard again. In relative terms. And we understand we start with thought and go to action, remain at action, number 6, and then we start to cascade back till we get to thought. So we understand those things. So now let's look at this Aseret HaDibrot through this prism of Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva. 1 to 5 is Rabbi Yishmael. It's bringing Hashem into our world. That's what it is. So we start with number 1. I am Hashem your God who has taken you out of the land of Egypt, the house of slavery. That is thought. We know Hashem. We've experienced Hashem. It's not that we have to believe in Hashem. We know Hashem. We experienced Him. He took us out of the land of Egypt. We were there. We know. So Hashem says, I am Hashem. We know that. But it doesn't require anything of us. It's just thought. We know there's Hashem. Then Hashem says, you shall have no other gods. Can't indulge or have anything to do with idolatry. That's still thinking. Now it's a different level because now we have to make a commitment. The first of the Aseret HaDibrot is I am Hashem. We know that. But now we have to commit. We're not allowed any other gods. We're not allowed to indulge in idolatry in any other way. But it's still all at the level of thinking. And then Hashem says for number 3, you shall not take my name in vain. And now we've gone from thought to speech. Because now we have to be careful the way we speak. We're not allowed to take Hashem's name in vain. This is a harder level of speaking. And then we get to number 4. And of course we know that number 4, Hashem said Zachor et Yom HaShabbat and Shamar et Yom HaShabbat. They were said together. We have Zachor in this week's Parsha, and we have Shamar in Ve'et Hanan when it's reprised in the Torah, but they were said together. So we have to remember Shabbat and we have to observe Shabbat. So now we're making Kiddush on a Friday night, which is testimony. And now we have 39 melachot and all the other things that we're not allowed to do on Shabbos, right? It actually monitors our behavior. Now we're in the realms of action. We've got to live it. These are things we've actually got to do. And we count the days around Shabbat and to Shabbat. And the whole central week is built around Shabbat. This is a much higher level. This is much more difficult. Let me show you that it's more difficult. How many Jews believe in Hashem? Most Jews, I would say, believe in Hashem. In fact, I think in the last census in Israel, over 85% of people said that they believe in Hashem. And how many Jews do we know that are idolaters? Thank God, Baruch Hashem, I don't know any. I don't think Jews are indulging in idolatry. And then how many Jews are taking Hashem's name in vain? I don't think deliberately any Jews are taking Hashem's name in vain. In other words, when you look at the first three of the Aseret HaDibrot, I think the majority of Klal Yisrael are doing the first three. But now let's get to Shabbos. How many Jews are Shomrei Shabbat? A lot less. In other words, we're going to degrees of how hard things are. Number 4 is much harder, and now we're in action. And then we get to number 5. Honor your father and mother. What does that mean? We have to honor our father and mother, not for anything they've done for us, but because they gave us life itself. We owe everything to them. And therefore we have to show gratitude. And that means honoring them, showing them kibbud. But of course, there are 3 involved in creation. There's father, there's mother, and there's Hashem. And therefore, we have to show Hashem gratitude as well. And that's a different level. Because now we're showing Hashem gratitude. That means saying Modet and Ani in the morning when we wake up. That means if Hashem has asked us to do something, the mitzvot in the Torah, we should do it. He gave us life itself. Now we're in for all the mitzvot. Of course, that's the hardest level of them all. Of that side of the Aseret HaDibrot, actualizing Hashem in our every single day. And so this is Rabbi Yishmael. We go from thought, because we go from the spiritual. So we go from thinking into bringing Hashem into this world with the actions that we take, the physical actions in this physical world that we take, and bringing Hashem into our world. The abstract thought in number 1 is easy in relative terms. By the time we get to number 5, we're living our entire lives, keeping mitzvot, davening, doing all the things that we should do. It's a much higher level, and all of us struggle to make sure that we fulfill that in every way that we should. Then we get from 6 to 10. And this is Rabbi Akiva. This is now us going from the physical world and ascending upwards to the spiritual. So it starts with action because we're in the physical world and we're going to get to the level of thinking as we go up the value chain of this spirituality. And so we're told not to murder. Don't destroy life. Understand the sanctity of life. And then we're told not to commit adultery. Don't distort intimacy. Control your passion. Then we're told not to steal, which we understand is not kidnapping. Why that? Because that rubs roughshod over the fact that a human being is made Selem Elokim. What is it to kidnap someone? It's to not treat them as sanctified. It's to treat them as an object. It's to objectify a human being. Because when you kidnap a human being, you kidnap them either to be your slave or to be a commodity where you can sell them or for your gratification. All 3 of those are then objectifying, making a human being an object, which runs roughshod over the fact they're made Selem Elokim. In relative terms, those are easy. Thank God, not many of us know people that have murdered anyone. And we don't have murderous intent. I'm not saying no human being does. The majority of human beings don't want to walk around murdering people. And we don't have people committing adultery all over the place. Yes, of course it happens. But we don't know people doing that all the time. And then kidnapping, thank God, we don't do that. I mean, we've unfortunately had recent times all the hostages in Eretz Yisrael. We know only too well what happens with kidnapping. But, each of us, we look at our friends, our communities, we're not kidnapping each other. Those are relatively easy things to show restraint for. But then we get to number 9. Do not bear false witness. What does that mean? Do not distort the truth. And the truth, Hashem is emet. Hashem is truth. When you distort the truth, you actually distort Hashem. And why not distort the truth with our speech? We're now into the level of speech. We're going up. And speech is the most godly of all attributes. And so most of us can say we've never murdered. And most of us can say we haven't committed adultery. And most of us can say we've never kidnapped. But how many of us can say we've never, ever distorted the truth with our speech? Probably none of us. Now we're into a much, much higher level. And then, of course, we get to number 10. Do not covet. And what is that? That is controlling desire. Control your inner desire. And so what we have as we go up this chain from 6 to 10 is we actually have a process of inner mastery of the way that we are, of raising ourselves to a spiritual level that we couldn't before. That's what we're talking about. This is Rabbi Akiva's side of things. If we understand all of that, we've been on this journey together. I have a problem with where we've got to. And I'll explain the problem. I understand 1 to 5 is bringing Hashem into this world. It's Rabbi Yishmael, which means we start with thought and we end up with action in the physical world. I understand that 6 to 10 is Rabbi Akiva, so we start with action in the physical world and we get up to number 10, this most spiritual of controlling of inner desire. I understand that, and I understand each side goes from easy to hard because we're raising up, we're raising the levels each time. But here's my problem. I understand that the side 1 to 5, is Ben Adam Lamakom. It's between man and Hashem. But what I don't understand is how can raising ourselves spiritually be Ben Adam Lachaveiro, between man and man? Surely if we want to raise ourselves spiritually to Shemayim, we want to soar, we want to understand Hashem, that should also be Ben Adam Lamakom. It should be between man and Hashem. How can the highest levels of spirituality come from commandments between man and man? So looking at Ramban, looking at Maharal, looking at the Sfat Emet, some others, eventually I got to the answer. And then we get to our Chiddush. The Ramban explains, you can keep kashrut, you can keep Shabbat, you can go to shul and daven every day with kavana, and you can still be a brute. So we need to bring Hashem into our world. We need that because morality is not subjective by human beings. It's objective and it comes from Hashem. But then we need to refine ourselves as well. And 6 to 10 is about refinement. Understand, don't murder. Understand the sanctity of life. Don't commit adultery. Understand the importance of intimacy and controlling passion. Do not steal, do not kidnap. Understand that every human being is made b'tselem Elokim. Do not bear false witness. Understand the importance of the truth. Don't distort the truth. Be careful how you speak. And then do not covet. Be able to control your inner desire. It's about refinement. So you have Hashem in this world and then you refine yourself so you can climb spiritually. So now we're starting to understand why this is the way it is and why the Aseret HaDibrot are laid out the way that they are. But then there's one other thing. And it's what makes Judaism unique, not like any other religion in the world. Because in every single other religion in the world, there is a form of abstention. Now, of course, there are things Jews can't do. That's not what I mean. But in order to become holy in all the other religions in the world, you actually abstain from this world in some way. So in Islam, Muslims abstain from alcohol. And in Christianity, in many sets of Christianity, like Catholicism, the highest form of holiness is to abstain. So if you want to be a priest or a monk or a nun, you don't get married, you don't have children because you're married to Hashem. And it's virtuous to live a basic life, a simple life, not indulge in too many of the luxuries that Hashem has put in this world. That's not a Jewish idea. Because in Judaism, we don't try and escape our humanity, we sanctify it. That is what 6 to 10 is about. Not escaping our humanity, but sanctifying it. And then we say, what is the most godly encounter we can have in this world? With another human being. Another human being that's made B'Tselem Elokim, in the image of Hashem. And now we understand this 6 to 10. It's Rabbi Akiva who says, the central commandment of the whole of Torah is what? Love your neighbor as yourself. Of course it's Rabbi Akiva that says that. Look how he sees the way that we saw. Ben Adam L'Chaveiro, by the commandments between man and man. And now we can understand the story of Abraham, where he leaves Hashem and says, please wait, while he goes and looks after the 3 strangers and gives them hospitality. How can he do that? Because in doing that, it is the most godly of activities. When we honor another human being, we honor Hashem himself. And so we bring Hashem into our world, 1 to 5, because that's the basis of morality. That's the basis of living the life that we should live. But then when we've done that, then we have to refine ourselves, because it's in the way that we treat others that we really honor Hashem. It's the way that we treat others. We sanctify Hashem because they're made B'Tselem Elokim. And now we realize why the second Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. Because the highest level of serving Hashem is actually to look after each other. And although we were keeping all the mitzvot, Bein Adam LaMakom, we weren't Bein Adam LaChaveiro. We also understand what we need to do to Bezrat Hashem see the Beit HaMikdash built once again. The way that we treat each other. Yes, we bring Hashem into this world. We don't ignore 1 to 5, Chas v'Shalom. We have to do that, because that's the basis of morality. But then it's 6 to 10. The way we treat each other by refining ourselves and treating other in the right way, that we rise spiritually. Bezrat Hashem, we should deserve the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash. And so we understand the Aseret HaDibrot. We understand what Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yishmael are talking about. We understand that the first half is about bringing Hashem into the world. And the second half is about soaring spiritually. That each side, it gets harder and harder. We start with knowing Hashem, but then having to actualize him in this world with the actions that we take, Shabbat and every mitzvot of every day. And we understand that to soar spiritually then, we take our actions and we refine ourselves so our inner being, our spiritual world, is also refined. And we raise ourselves up. And then we say yes to the positive mitzvot and yes to the negative, because it's all one. It's all the divine will. And we understand that, and the spiritual world becomes as tangible as the physical world, as Rabbi Akiva explains. Bezrat Hashem, we should be able to take these lessons on board. We should be the best versions of ourselves that we can be. We can raise ourselves up spiritually, and in so doing, deserve the coming of Mashiach and the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash. Bimhera v'yameinu.